down. Just a little bit down.
Where is it?
It's very
Molly,
tender.
hello Molly.
Molly's in the house.
Molly, wait.
Oh, she's out already.
Yeah, it's too heavy.
Too heavy.
Mom, my face is out.
Morning!
Mom, my face is out.
Morning, everyone. Hey, Mom.
No, Grace is saying go stop, and I'm saying no. Good morning, good morning.
Hello, Robbie. Seppi. Morning, Wiseman.
Morning, Kath.
I have to learn to pronounce your new surname, Kath. Congratulations.
Morning, Gagi. There's Gagi.
Turkey.
How are you doing, Seppi? I'll see you soon.
Shani.
Shannon.
Shannon says hello, beauties.
Hello, Shan.
What is it, boots? Like a tablet.
Good morning, Isabel.
Okay, just one more chorus.
Good morning, Gaga. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Lenny. Good morning, Alta. Good morning, Daniel.
Yeah, give me the phonetics, thanks, Ken. I can read phonetic. Awesome, welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us this morning. Lovely, cool Sunday morning, which we're really, really thankful for. Thank you for tuning in on Facebook Live.
We're coming to you live.
Again.
Let's go.
Okay, Ava's ready to bounce.
I was ready to bounce. Let's bounce.
Okay. Molly, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Sharon. Guys, morning to everyone. Welcome to Sunday morning, 10:30. Looking forward to spending a couple of moments with you today. And yeah, it's been a good week
Morning, Sharon.
on all the normal fronts. Hope so for you too.
You can leave her, she's okay.
Then
She's
the
always
Hadi
here.
does come.
No, she's always here.
Okay, all right, we'll take a chance.
Watch her.
Take a chance.
Nope, it's okay, it's okay.
Morning Piet, ons dink aan jou. Laat weet wat ons betaal.
Oh, Pete, okay, thanks for letting us know.
Laat weet maar wat ons betaal daar, Piet. Guys, well, welcome. It's been a very interesting week in the world,
Yeah.
and we're thankful to be with you today. Today I want to speak on the spirit of war, which is something I don't think I've ever done before. I feel like my life is changing rapidly, so I generally these days talk about things I never used to talk on before. But I was just completely perplexed this week about what was happening up in Europe, specifically in Ukraine, and just affected by it. Like, I'm not sure if it's more than what I should be or less than what I should be. I'm not sure, but it's just been occupying my mind. In general, we know data shows that war is on the decline in humanity. From our earliest tribal primitive origins, we've steadily become more peaceful, and that's wonderful. But to wake up to war in Europe, serious war in Europe, is perplexing. It just catches you by surprise, and it's not something that we want. It's not something that we really want to see, but it's something that is there now. It's a little bit of a, the decline of war is not a straight line. It's not a linear graph, but it has its ups and downs, and unfortunately it seems like this is one of those ups that we're going to have to deal with. And as you very well know, it's a very complicated situation. I don't have any Ukrainian friends. I have many Russian friends, good people, salt of the earth. So when we speak about the spread of war today, I don't want anyone to think that we're talking about any particular nation so much as we are talking about this inherent propensity for violence that's within the human race, really, that eventually moves from an individual level to a corporate level. I think that's where the disconnect lies, Tori, for so many of us, is that, if I can use some examples, like we'd be okay with having national pride, but we're not okay if a person in his personal capacity is vain. We are right with capitalism, unrestrained capitalism, but we don't like it when a person in his individual capacity is greedy. We're okay with it to do cover-ups for big corporates and sometimes even within the church for the greater good, but we hate it when people tell lies. And so the same goes for war. Most of us are against murdering people. But the moment it goes to a national or a corporate level, we start looking at it as something that is okay, or that is necessary, or maybe some would call it a necessary evil, or some even might refer to it as good. And there seems to be this disconnect between what's happening on the personal level and what happens on a corporate level. And many of us, including Christians, we're caught like in the middle of that. Like we don't really know where we fit in. So there's a lot to be said about that, and that's not really the focus of today. The reality is just that there's mixed feelings about war, and aggression. So I find it quite curious that our portion in Mark today, which is Mark 5, the next portion we're supposed to be going to, is about Jesus driving out a demon called Legion, which is the word for the Roman military unit of between 3,000 and 6,000 people, something that was quite known to Jesus' time. They were occupied by the Romans, enslaved to some degree, subdued by the Romans. And here he's driving out this demon, and the demon calls himself Legion, which of course refers to many, but at the same time is also the word for Roman military unit. So I find it quite curious that is our next little portion here. And so I just felt like that really spoke to me, and I want to kind of, this is not straight exegesis as many of you would know, but just what the portion is saying to us, or can be saying to us. And so what happens is, last week we spoke about Jesus coming through the storm. Life is a storm, not just the storms of life. And so they make it to the other side, and he's disappointed they didn't trust him. But when they do get to the other side, life doesn't get much easier, because now they're confronted by a madman. A madman that nobody could ever tame. They try to shackle this dude, but he keeps on breaking loose from the shackling. He not only harms others, but he actually he inflicts self-damage on himself. He cuts himself with stones and whatnot. He's well known as the Gadarene. Interestingly enough, the word or the area of the Gadarene is the Gadara, I think. Correct me on the pronunciation if you like. But it actually means everything will be okay in the end. It means the reward lies at the end, which is an interesting, in the scriptures, you can never take those things as just that. Yeah, they're not coincidences many times, because they were written backwards. But the point is that in the middle of the place called everything will be okay, or the reward's going to be at the end, there's a guy that's lost it. He's violent. It's one of the main characteristics of this Gadarene is he's violent towards others and violent towards himself. So we pick it up in Mark 5. They came into the country of the Gadarenes, and when they came out of the ship, immediately, like the action never stops, right? There came a man to meet them out of the tombs, a man with an unclean spirit. So in a moment, in the next verse, let me just read verse 3. He had his dwelling amongst the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not even with chains. And so what we have here is we have a man that lives in death, like he lives amongst the dead. He comes out immediately from these tombs, from this place of death, and the scripture says, or it's Mark that records it for us. He says he had an unclean spirit. Now, I know how many Christians think about this. They think of it as a spiritual being somewhere that's bad. But, firstly, the word spirit in the New Testament, pneuma, can also be used for soul or mind. And so I would like us to concentrate today not on some metaphysical being, but rather the condition of the man. The mind of the man, the perplexity in the soul of the man, the problems within his soul. And the word unclean here also means an unpruned soul. which is interesting because the idea of pruning is very pertinent in the New Testament, also Old Testament. It just means that when you're unpruned, it means that you have not allowed yourself to be shaped, disciplined, formed to bear fruit. If you think about the way we prune plants, fruit trees, we maximize them for fruit. And this man, this Gadarene, has not been pruned, and his soul is in a position, in a place of death, because he has not allowed shaping to take place in him. Or if we look at the meaning of the word Gadarene, maybe just not yet. Maybe just not yet. So they're confronted by the Gadarene. I'm not sure where the disciples are at this point. They might be back in the boat. I'm not quite confident that they would learn trust in 24 hours. I did not. So they might be back in the boat or behind a bush somewhere as they're confronted with not only the violence of a storm, but now the violence of a mad dude. So verse 4 explains a little bit more about him. They try to bind him up with shackles and chains. He just pulls them asunder. And he breaks the chains and the fetters, right? Chains and the blocks. And nobody could tame him. And I'm running slightly ahead of myself, but what we could see here going on is that what we're really dealing with is spirit of violence within someone. Or in a larger sense, I think personally, when I look at the Gadarene, this is how I like to read the scriptures. I don't just project it back onto some dude that walked in the Middle East. I, number one, take it for myself. And number two, I believe it's indicative of all of humanity.
Yeah.
All of humanity. To some degree, all of humanity lives amongst the two. We're busy coming out from the tombs. Yes, we do believe that everything will be okay in the end. You know, the reward will lie at the end. But the reality is we're still full of a lot of violence. Nobody can tame us. And from time to time, even in our own lives, that violence erupts. You know, I mean, think of road rage, think of brawling at the pub or whatever. There's just times when you just, not me so much, I'm not so really good at brawling, but there are times when we feel like we can't control our anger, and it spills over into some form of physical hurt and violence that we do to those around us. And of course, our greatest disease is hypocrisy, and we always justify our own violence, and then we always find fault with other people's violence. And in other words, what I mean is whenever we do inflict pain or hurt, whether it be in physical violence or mental or emotional, we justify it, right? We can justify it. But
we know how we feel.
Yeah, we know how we feel. But whenever somebody else does it, we condemn them. And this is the thing that Jesus really was against the idea of hypocrisy, because Jesus never went around condemning sinners. He never actually did that. The only thing he ever went around condemning or speaking against was exactly this, hypocrisy. Was the idea that you could condemn the stuff you're guilty of yourself in someone else. And it should be a lesson for us. But anyway, so nobody could tame this guy. He was going mad. He was always night and day in the mountains, in the tombs. He was crying. The word crying here is not crying with tears. It means croaking like a raven. And he was cutting himself with stones. And so, unfortunately, the reality of violence on a personal, but also on a corporate and even a national level, is that it always inflicts self-harm as well. And that's maybe what we don't always understand. Okay, so, but, verse 6, when he saw Jesus from afar, as he notices Jesus from afar, he ran towards him and worshipped him. This is so strange little portion in here. I wouldn't expect that. You would expect him to attack him. The violent man to attack him. You would expect him to run away maybe.
Yeah.
What you do not expect of the violent is to come and worship. And I think this tells us something very important, Tor, that even those who perpetuate violence, who are involved in violence, have a good side to them, have a human side to them, have reasons why they do what they do. And we can't just neglect people's reasons. People have, in their mind at least, those reasons are legitimate, even if we might feel they are wrong. In their mind, they are legitimate. And what I see here when I look at the Gadarene is I realize there's someone that's perplexed in his own mind, but can recognize good and actually can bow before the good. Worship in this portion doesn't mean he's saying Amazing Grace with a guitar, but it means he fell to the ground.
But the fact that Jesus was far off, and when he saw him, he ran towards him. It's not just the fact only that he has good in him, but that while he is in this turmoil and while he's hurting himself and others, he is waiting. Because when you're waiting for something and you see it, you run towards it. So it's almost like, even when
He's been looking for this.
He wants it. He wants it. And you think sometimes when you see the violence of people that are doing things that hurt themselves and hurt other people, you don't think that they actually want good in their lives.
And I think that's an illusion that we create for ourselves to justify ourselves and condemn other people. And I think this is one of the things we need to be careful of, even when it comes to what we're dealing with in the world right now, that we don't demonize nations. That we realize that people have reasons for what they do. It doesn't mean we have to agree with what people are doing. Personally, I am against war. But we have to recognize that there are reasons why people do what they do. Doesn't always make it right, but that's the thing we deal with. And I think seeing the human side of the Gadarene here is important, because when we see someone perpetuating violence or perpetuating even war, we have to realize there's a humanity there. There's a humanness there that needs to be addressed. And I think this is what Jesus had that we don't have anymore today, is that Jesus had the ability to sit with that Gadarene. We condemn the Gadarene and we stay away and we tell everybody how bad the Gadarene is. Where Jesus was different.
Yeah.
There's no ways that Jesus was walking towards him with a stone or a sword or with bad intention. I actually think it makes sense to me that it was the look on Jesus' face that made the man worship. It was the peaceful openness with which he approached, because Jesus wasn't looking at the cuts or the shackles that were laying around or the fact that he was coming from the tomb. He was looking at him saying, I see the humanness in you. And that broke that man. Even though he was still in a state of some form of madness, I guess. And so verse 7 says, and he cried out with a loud voice, and he says, what have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you that you torment me not. And so what we see here is, and in fact, if you look at the Greek here, it's quite a simple statement. Just what do I have to do with thee? Is almost like what I and you. That's kind of what it looks like. The Greek looks like this, very simple. Like, what is there that we have in common? Why are me and you here? Why are you here? And what is there between us? Like, what is it in you that's confronting me? What is it in me that's confronting you? Why are you and me together? And I think that is really the cry of humanity at the same time. And we expect people to condemn us, but God does not condemn us. God comes with love, and I think that's what makes this Gadarene ask the question, why are you here? Are you going to torment me? Are you going to hurt me? I think the Gadarene, much of his problem is also that over time, probably people have abused him, have exiled him, have spoken ill of him, they've shifted him to the side, and they've made him out to be something which, yes, he has to bear some responsibility for, but people stop humanizing their enemies. And if there is one message that is important, is in the New Testament, is to love your enemy. And it's the hardest of all the things Jesus kind of expects from us, because it's so counterintuitive, and it seems impossible, actually, to be honest. But in this moment, what you have here is you have one with propensity for violence and one with an enduring, everlasting love. And when they come together, there's something special that happens here. Now, when violence meets violence, the Gadarene gets infuriated, the Gadarene becomes worse, he breaks the shackles. When you try and tame the Gadarene with shackles and bonds, you're dehumanizing him. And when you do that, he just becomes crazier than ever before. And people obviously had tried that. That's kind of what we read about him. But when Jesus comes to the Gadarene, there's something else happening there. There's a different chemistry that happens. And I can't ignore the fact that this, or the idea that this would have been the love that made the Gadarene think differently. And so his response, although he sees this Jesus unafraid walking towards him, his response is out of I guess, what he's used to. Have you come to shackle me? Have you come to put me in a cage somewhere?
Yeah.
Have you come to torment me?
Yeah.
And so he recognizes Jesus also as Son of God, meaning that he is a representative of God, that he represents God in that moment to him, if we want to apply that to ourselves. And Jesus said to him, "Come out, unclean spirit." In other words, Jesus in this moment says to the thing that's holding him captive, "Hey, stop it and come out." And so what I see here is Jesus makes a distinction between the man and his condition,
Yeah.
between
Separates them.
the value of a person and the condition or the actions of a person. Now, I think that's something that's quite actually hard to do. If you've ever been married or you've ever just with the people you really, really love, it's sometimes hard to do that. Even more so those who might hurt you, those who might speak evil of you. It's so hard to separate the value of the person, to hold the person still as valuable, and at the same time reject what they are doing. It's hard. It's hard to do that. But I think this is a beautiful example of something exactly like this. And then Jesus says to him, he says, "What's your name?" And as he personifies this horrible way of living, thinking, this propensity for violence. And he asks him, "What's your name? Like, what are you that's keeping this person in such a bad place?" And he answered, he says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So this is what really got me going, because Legion is not just the word for many. There are many other words you could have used here for a lot of. But Legion is the Roman word, or the Latin, comes from the Latin. That means a Roman military unit between 3,000 and 6,000 strong. It was these type of units that basically ran the known world at this stage. The Roman Empire broadened their borders by use of the legions. They were the most feared in the known world by the enemies of Rome. Like, it's just weird that why would this thing call itself that? But I think what's happening here is actually more than what we could just see at the surface, because we need to remember that within a very short time, Jesus would be hanging on a cross, condemned to death by the legion, condemned to death by the Roman army. And I think when we think of the cross in that way, we need to remember that the cross, Jesus on the cross, it was legitimate in terms of religious law. It was a legitimate killing, right?
Yeah.
Because he was, according to Moses' law, he was committing blasphemy.
Yeah.
And the religious leaders had the backing of God to kill people that did that. And so, according to the law, or let's call it the religious law of humans, Jesus' death was a legitimate death. According to the law of the empire of the day, of the legion of the day, Jesus' death was a legitimate death. But he was innocent. And I think what we see there, maybe, Tori, is the reality that our laws, our legitimizing of violence is not always right, because it could condemn the most innocent. The human laws of putting people or justifying violence against others is misguided, because often the innocent are the ones that get killed in these moments. And I think maybe there's a moment here that Jesus realized, or I don't know, spiritual something happening here, where he drives out the demons, the Roman or the legion, the military, the violence. He drives it out, knowing fully that he's gonna be the victim of the Spirit very, very soon. But I think that's one of the beautiful things of the cross, is that from then on, forever, the act of Jesus, the sacrifice he made, undercuts forever the spirit of violence and the legitimacy of it.
Yeah.
Forever in the human race. And I know we've made so many mistakes, and I know the church has been complicit in so much of this. It's frightening. Our history is not on our side. But forever, since those days, legitimizing violence will be undercut by an innocent on the cross, killed by legitimate violence. And I think that's one of the great messages of the cross is exactly that, that it speaks today. Today, we don't like war, and this is the reason we don't like it. It's the innocent. It's the dehumanizing of peoples, nations, that causes this. So, how does this story end here? Well, you know how it ends. Jesus, in the account of Mark, sends all these demons into the pigs, right? There's pigs there, right? He sends the demons into the pigs, spirit into the pigs. I would have liked to have seen what that would have looked like. And these pigs, they just run straight for a cliff, and they run and they die in the sea, and they choke in the sea. And so what you're left with is, in verse 15, a Gadarene who sits clothed in his right mind. And then what does he say? He says to Jesus, can I follow you? Can I go where you go? He wanted to be a disciple, right? And Jesus says, no, you can't. You need to go back to where you come from. Go tell people what has happened to you. And that's kind of how it ends. Jesus says in verse 19, he says, go home to your friends, tell them the great things Lord has done for you, and has had compassion on you. So, two things before we end. Number one, how do we confront violence with compassion? I know it's counterintuitive. I myself struggle to make sense of it. All I know is that's the message and the central message of the gospel.
Yeah.
And as counterintuitive as it might be for us still today, that's where we need to head.
Yes.
That's where we need to aim. Compassion has to swallow the violent. Peace has to swallow anger. I'm reminded at this junction of what Jesus said in his most important speech, I guess, the Beatitudes, in which two of them he says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. It's counterintuitive because today, in the way we see some nations acting, some, not all, some. To them, it's not like that. To them, it's blessed are the strong, for they will inherit the earth.
Yes.
When we talk to people around us, projecting strength seems to be the most important thing, and that is so anti the message of Jesus. The message of Jesus is not project yourself as strong so that nobody will trample on you. The message of Jesus is blessed are the meek, those who can restrain their strength, because they will, in the end, Gadarene, in the end, you will be your reward.
Yeah.
They will inherit the meek. And then also the other one there, and there's many there, but the other one is blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. I think in a time like that, like this today, these words ring truer than ever before. Lastly, I want to say, and I've totally forgot what my last point was, and it was quite a rather important one.
Yeah.
So I didn't make notes this morning. I tried to write things down, and I just every time I wrote something down, I thought in a different direction. Eventually I said, I'm just going to shoot off the cuff this morning. Oh yes, this is my final point. A lot of Christian theology and eschatology expects and almost anticipates things to become worse and worse, specifically with regards to war. They feel that feeds into their expectation of their end time, what has to happen in the end time. I reject that notion completely. I believe that peace on earth is what God is after, and why he was willing to die at the hands of legitimate religion and legitimate, and when I say legitimate, I mean in their own eyes, empire.
Yeah.
And I want to say that the spirit of war will end in the pigs and in the ocean. It'll end in the sea. Because this is how the story ends. The Gadarene is okay, and the spirit of violence ends up swallowed by the sea. In the Bible, from the very early parts of the Bible, Genesis right throughout to Revelation, the idea of sea is that deep abyss, the uncreated, the unordered, the chaos, the unconscious, or uncreated, I think is a nice way of thinking on it. It gets swallowed up. And so I would like to say, in the middle of all of the stuff we're going through, and we have to go through it, and we have to walk through it, because we need to be pruned as humanity. our propensity for violence is just because we're still unpruned in many ways. But I want to say that the spirit of war will end in the sea, and it will be swallowed up. So keep your head up. Don't dehumanize people. Don't dehumanize people. Look for the humanity in others. React with compassion. React with love. This is the Christian way. Unfortunately, so many people who aren't Christians are living by the Beatitudes. And so many people who are Christians have rejected the Beatitudes, including every one of us. We want to project strength. We don't believe that peace is the best way. Peace is the best way if it benefits us. Peace, meekness, being willing to be persecuted for righteousness' sake, being pure of heart and of motive. Those are the things that carry the blessing of God in that sense. So I want to make a call on all who follow Jesus to follow Jesus in this respect. Not only on the national level, but also on the personal level, Tori.
Yeah. And when you see that peace coming towards you as well, when it's you that has the turmoil and you that has the struggle, when you see glimpses of that peace through whoever God sends to your life, run towards that and surround yourself with people that are like-minded, and the thing is, you might find them in the most unlikely places.
Yeah.
But that God uses people to bring peace.
Yeah, because you can't disarm violence with violence. The spiral of violence we have seen. We see it in our gangs. We see it in national disaster, war disasters. We have to confront the Gadarene with compassion, and understand that his actions does not devalue him as a person. And so that's how we need to treat our parents, that's how we need to treat our spouses, and that's how we need to look at our enemies. And I know I will be the first to say that I'm still an unpruned tree when it comes to this. But I need to have some place to aim, and this is where I need to aim. This is where humanity is aiming and is heading. Join the train. The spirit of war will end in the sea. Anything else you want to add to that, Tori?
Nope.
Let's
That's
think
good.
about the people that are dislodged, those who are losing their lives, mothers, fathers, people are losing their livelihood. All people, whether Russian or Ukrainian, that this war has brought unpeace to. Pray for them, think of them. Let's meet anger with compassion. One of the old men of the Bible wrote and said, don't try to overcome evil with evil, but overcome evil with good. And however that is possible and is workable in your life, I know it's hard, but that's where you need to aim. That should be your aim. And you're going to fail, and I fail, but
It's hard.
we have to aim that way. Right.
Good.
Blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek. Have a wonderful day, guys.
Yes.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.